Okay, so I've got the video on so that online students can get this information. Also, it's class time, so put your cell phones on silent. Let me make sure mine is on silent. And put them away. Yes, mine is on silent.
Like the teachers are exempt from the teacher's
Peripheral vision. Peripheral vision. Anyway, so okay, so we've all got our cell phones on silent, and I need to talk about two logistical things that everybody face-to-face and online students need. Number one, I got way more reaction papers from people this last week, week 3, than in previous weeks. That's usually when it picks up, is during week 3. So I need to make sure that you know to do a few things about reaction papers, okay? Number one, when you turn it in online, you're using a journal tool, and when you turn it in to me in person, you're either typing it up or writing it out and giving me a physical copy. When you get it back from me graded, you will see, if you got credit on it, you will see this written on it or entered into the Blackboard gradebook. If you're a face-to-face student, it'll be both. You'll see this written physically on your copy and see this recorded in Blackboard according to the kind of reaction paper that it was. In Blackboard, in the My Grades link, you should see 10 listings for reaction papers. 5 of them, it says 1 through 5 regular reaction paper, and it says 1 through 5 outside source reaction paper, I think. Right? 5 plus 5 is the 10 reaction papers. Okay, so make sure when you turn one into me, if it had an outside source in it that you needed credit for that outside source, on your physical paper that I've written, it should say outside source. In your online comment, I would have written to you, if you're an online student, outside source someplace. And then when I go to record it in the gradebook, it should be in the outside source section, okay? And what I need you to do, please, is keep track of your reaction papers. If you know that you turned one in that's supposed to be an outside source, you need to make sure that that new grade that you see entered is in the outside source section, because I'm not perfect and I get distracted and I don't want to give you credit for the wrong kind, right? You have to have 5 outside sources. Some people do all 10 of theirs with outside sources just because they like to do that, but 5 of them have to have it. So please make sure that I always give you the correct credit. And if I don't, just simply show it to me, and I will be happy to fix it. I apologize in advance.
Would you like us to point it out?
That also helps. Yes, that helps if you point it out in the paper and online. If you want to say it in your, when you submit that journal, that's fine. But even when students point it out, if my cat starts meowing or something and I need to let him out, something like that, then I come back and enter your grade. If I get distracted in some kind of way, sometimes I'll put it in the wrong place. So y'all just keep track of it, especially if you're getting a physical copy back from me as a face-to-face student. Keep them all at least until the end of the semester, because sometimes I might forget to enter your grade at all. I might grade it, I might put this on there, and then I never go back to Blackboard and stick it into my grades. And if that happens, please just tell me, hey, I've done 6 reaction papers and you've only got 5 up there or something, and just show me your 6 and I'll stick the 6th one in there. That's also just an oversight. So make sure you please help me. Sometimes, you wouldn't think that I'd have trouble counting to 10, but sometimes I do. Okay, so it's not personal, just let me know and I'll fix it. Okay, so any questions really quick about reaction papers before I move on to Project 1 questions? We're good. And then of course you got quizzes back from me too, and so the quizzes should be in the gradebook also. If you ever notice that you get one back and it's not in the gradebook, the same thing applies, okay, for face-to-face students. Okay, so there were a couple questions about Project 1, which I posted on Friday. Apparently I didn't remember if I posted it on Thursday or Friday, but I think I posted it on Friday, sent out a notification on Friday that's available. I have already had a few people text me getting permission to do a movie or a novel or a video game that's not on the list. I gave you a list of 4 or 5 things, 4 or 5 movies, 4 or 5 historical events. I don't know, there's different topics on there that you can choose from and use to analyze Mr. Help. If you want to get approval to do something other than what's on the list, send me a quick text, see me during my office hours, in between classes, something like that, and explain to me why I want to do XYZ movie or XYZ novel. I want to do this novel, and here's why I think it would be good. I want to know whether you've looked at the questions you're supposed to answer. Look at the questions you're supposed to answer, because regardless of whether you choose to write answers to those questions, do a Prezi is one of your options, do a video, like I do videos for class, as one of your options. Those questions are what I'm going to be looking for. I'm going to be looking for or listening for the answers to those questions when I'm grading you. So look at those questions and decide, can I use this movie that I want to use to get really awesome answers to these questions? And you just send me a quick text and say, I can do it, I've looked at the questions, and I know that this will work. And so please give me approval. I'll shoot you a quick text message back that says yes or no, or I need more information, and we'll go from there. Okay? Who has questions about Project 1? Sir?
Is it possible to do like a joint project between two people and like turn that in as the thing?
The question is, can you do a joint project between two people? And no, I'm not prepared to do that. Good try, but no. It needs to be individual work. Anybody else? You said you had questions. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so Project 1, it's posted now. If you did not see my email that went out on Friday, shame on you. I need you to check your UAPTC email more often, or set notifications on that Blackboard app so you'll have a little red dot or something when there's something new. So check your school stuff more often, okay? Alrighty, so I will expect lots of text messages or questions about that as they come up. Are we good? Okay, so let's get some more information for this week's reaction paper choices and this week's quiz questions, okay? So quiz questions are always going to come from the moment, from your notes, from the moment that we took the last quiz, which was first thing in class the last time we saw each other, to the next Thursday, right, for us, or Saturday, as the case may be on the online class. So, one thing that I know I neglected to be clear about in the last video is the point between, we're still talking about the demographic transition model, and we will finish that discussion today and move into Chapter 3's topics, which still have to do with population. Please notice that I wrote the pages from Chapter 3 that I would like you to read that go along with what we're talking about today and Thursday in class, that I'll post on YouTube on those 2 days. I'll take a picture of this for online students and post it in this week's folder. But Chapter 3, these pages correspond to the topics that we're going to talk about in class. We're going to get into things like, well, they're called push and pull factors for migration, because right now in the demographic transition model, we're talking specifically about, or mostly about, the birth rate and the death rate and how that drives what we call a natural increase rate of population growth. But there are other factors. Chapter 3 gets into other factors about how population size can be affected by things other than birth and death rate, right? People can move for various reasons. And so that's what Chapter 3 is all about. We probably will finish demographic transition today in class and then go straight on into Chapter 3 and then finish it up on Thursday. Okay? All right, so in our last class, we talked about, you'll find someplace in your notes where we talked about a medical revolution happening, right? So toward the end of stage 2, the medical revolution happened, and then that's where stage 3 occurs, where the birth rate starts to decline. It's still higher than the death rate, but it starts to decline, and there's a lot of factors like more food being available, but medical care also that prolongs life is another part of why the natural increase rate continues to rise in stage 3. It doesn't rise as sharply in stage 3 as it did in stage 2, but all of those reasons that we have listed in our notes past the medical revolution, things like urbanization, things like building of infrastructure, and those kinds of topics that we discussed about are part of the stage 3 of the demographic transition model. So, are there any, so put that, if you're keeping track, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, I wasn't clear about, hey, this is part of stage 3 in our conversation on Thursday of last week. So please make sure you identify that spot in your notes if you're keeping track of them that way. Okay, so let's talk about how far, let me make sure we got all the way through stage 3. Check. So we were talking about the importance, what'd you say? Yeah, so we were talking about the importance of infrastructure. So Carla's given me the big topic, and then specifically in the infrastructure discussion. That's right, we watched a video about how important proper sanitation is, for instance, in order to help keep a healthy population. Yes, so that's pretty much the end, That's pretty much the end of our stage 3 discussion. So let's talk about stage 4 and then the debatable stage 5 of the demographic transition model. And if you'd like to get your Blackboard app out and look at that week 3 folder where I posted that picture, a much better picture than this one, of the demographic transition model, it probably would be helpful to have that in front of you while we're talking about this. Okay, so stage 4 in the demographic transition, let me give you just a second to open that picture. I see some of y'all doing that.
Yeah, week 3.
I'm sorry?
Week 3.
Yes. So you put the stage 3 starts right there at that, right after where we talked about the medical revolution and then all of the urbanization that occurs and the movement from rural to city living and that kind of thing.
Is there some page in the book that this is following on?
This is still, stage 4, the demographic transition section is in chapter 2. Page 44, I want to say it's somewhere around page 44. Okay, the picture that's included in your textbook, which I don't like, which is why I posted one on the Blackboard app, is on page 44. So it's somewhere around there is the middle of the demographic transition discussion, that we're having. Okay, so
Pictures aren't showing up.
in week 3,
Yeah, no, there's no pictures. Oh.
It's like the paper clip. You have to tap the paper clip. It's weird.
why don't you turn around and have Carla show you what to do? You've had it? I see a picture of something.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so in stage 4, so stage 3, we still have a birth rate that's much higher than the death rate. So we still have growth in the population, and that culture lag, that knowledge about how you don't have to have such a huge family anymore because you don't need those children to be laborers for you. I mean, please don't misunderstand. Of course, people still loved their children, but the main reason you had such a huge family is because those children were not only your laborers that could bring in value to the family. And keep that in mind, children as benefits to the family. Children were economic benefits to the family back in like stage 2. And that mindset was still very much part of the cultural schema in stage 3. In stage 4, children become something that is seen of as expensive. Children, instead of being an economic benefit, children are an economic toil, or they are taxing for a family. Children are expensive. Part of the reason is population has gone up so much in the urban areas. There are so many adults still alive because the crude death rate has gone way down, so there are so many adults living longer and so many children maturing to adulthood. Adults need the jobs. Adults need the jobs that are available. Back on the farm, if you could carry a bucket, you were working on the farm already, right? You were 3 years old hauling eggs back from the chicken coop or something. Okay, so we would put you to work really early, and so the idea of childhood, the definition of childhood, as a matter of fact, is a very new definition as far as history goes. Childhood as a time period where there's play and minimal responsibility and a transitional kind of your freedom to not really have responsibilities for a family. That kind of idea about childhood is a stage 4 kind of idea. So we see the culture lag of having a huge family to be laborers for you has completely transitioned where children are seen as expensive. They are a liability. The adults need jobs. So you see things like child labor laws come into effect. Child labor laws? Now, you might not, have you heard of child labor laws before? Yeah. Which, so we have them in effect now. My granddaughter, for instance, is 14. She's waiting to be 14 and a half because where she lives, if you're 14 and a half, you can start working 10 hours a week max, but not more than 10 hours a week, and she wants that job, okay? Now, this particular granddaughter I'm talking about is very capable and probably could have done 10 hours a week when she was 12, but the laws don't let her do that. One of her little brothers is probably not going to be responsible enough to get a job until he's like 17 or 18, right? So in the past, families could be the policing force that put children into the responsibility niches that they needed to be in or pulled them out. In stage 4, we have so many adults still living longer and longer lives because of this medical revolution that the adults are the ones who need jobs, and children's role in society gets really redefined, so they are playthings, can I say that? They are expensive things that people have sort of because it's the thing to do, rather than having huge families because they need farm laborers. Yes, sir.
What was stage 4 called again?
Stage 4.
Just
Yes,
name?
in stage 4, you see decreasing birth rates, but also decreasing death rates. And so the natural increase rate of the population stabilizes. So if you've got a CBR, crude birth rate, of this, and a CDR, crude death rate, of this, you don't have population growing, right? You've got your population that increased by leaps and bounds back in stage 2 and 3. It really, really increased, and you can probably see it better on that picture that I posted on Blackboard. But then in stage 4, even though you've got a really high population, this line here has stabilized, and it's not increasing or decreasing yet. It's got a replacement. The replacement rate, as far as birth and death is going, as far as that is concerned, the replacement rate is pretty even. And that replacement rate, we're back to that, how many children per woman. The replacement rate for a society to maintain its population is 2.1 children per woman. So that doesn't mean, so for instance, if I have 0 children but Josie has 5, then we've got 2.5 children per woman here. Right? So it doesn't matter if this person has 10 children for whatever kind of reason. Maybe they just have the money for it. Maybe it's a religious calling, whatever it is. If this person has 10 and these 3 people have 0, then you can still have that 2.1 or 2 point whatever, that fractional child per woman. So as long as you're having a 2.1 total fertility rate, you'll see this abbreviation in your reading assignment. Also, as your total fertility rate goes down but stays around 2.1, you've got you're replacing equal numbers of people who are dying, you're replacing them with births. And so you see stable population. Stable population numbers. Whoops. And yeah, and 0 population growth. So you've got, if you have a 2.1 fertility rate, total fertility rate, that's 2.1 children per female, then you've got 0 population growth, which I've got a whole lot of 3-letter abbreviations for you, but 0 population growth would happen when your total fertility rate is like 2.1. You've got a really high population, and that's what we're looking at in stage 4. So countries like the United States, countries like Europe, stage 4 is what we're looking at. There's more to do with it though than total fertility rate, which is why we talk about push and pull migration factors in chapter 3. Okay. Another really important issue, a social issue that we talk about in stage 4 is women's rights or women's role in society. Women's empowerment. Notice here I've got a gender non-specific term. There's adults that need jobs. Okay? In stage 2, and then still in the mindset of many people in stage 3, what was a woman's role, do you think, from looking at the
House.
baby makers, to have children? Children were a vital necessity to get by. They were vital to the economy. They were a treasure, a point of richness for your household, because children could bring you benefit. They could bring you economic benefit. So woman's role was high in regard to the fact that she could have children, but because she had children, her empowerment in society was limited to that domestic role, motherhood. You have a child, and let me just tell you, childless folks out there, they don't take care of themselves, okay? So you have, and in an agricultural society, or in a society that is not very urbanized yet, it is the mother's role, it is the older sister's role to, oh yes, I've got an older sister saying yes, yes, yes. It is an older sister's role to take care of the younger children in the household, help the mother with this kind of thing. So there was a lot of work to do, and you could argue there was vital, like that women were the most vital component of society in stage 1, 2, and 3. However, in stage 4, you see women's role in society change, and they are empowered to do other things outside the domestic sphere. So there's women in the workforce, there's women in education, and I don't just mean teaching, I mean actually getting an education to begin with. They aren't just learning domestic things like how to make clothes for the family or how to feed the family or how to do the women's work on the farm. They aren't just learning that kind of stuff. Women are becoming those researchers in medicine that are getting, making advancements and helping society benefit over the long haul. So women's roles change significantly in stage 4 when you see this empowerment. You see this transition from baby maker to career person. Career person. Women are older, typically, before they have children. In stage 4, they're older. They are more educated. Because they're older, do you think they're having more children or fewer children? Fewer is the correct answer. So if, for instance, you are going from high school into higher education, which a lot of women do in our stage 4 society today, how old are you if you do everything on time in college? About how old are you when you graduate from college? 22, 23? I had to do it a little slower than that. I was 27 when I graduated from college. But yeah, you're in your 20s sometime, right? And is it easier or more difficult to drag babies along with you while you're getting your college degree? Much more difficult. I'm glad that the men answered that question too. It's not just the women answering that question. Much more difficult to drag babies along with you, right? So, so women are staying in their career of education to get a worker's career after that before they're having children. We see that as a major mindset change from stage 2 definitely, and even stage 3 where you still saw a lot of people having those big families, just because it was the way we've always done stuff. It was the way it's always been done. We've always had big families or whatever. Well, let's look at the cultural reasons why that was economically feasible back then, and maybe look at the cultural reasons why that's not economically feasible now. Not just not economically feasible, but a lot of times women these days opt not to have families at all because of the expense. What can you do with your money if you aren't spending it on Junior, for instance? I always ask my students how much daycare is these days, because I don't keep up with it anymore, but does anybody have how much is?
It depends. Like for babies, $135 a week.
$135 a week for a baby. If there's a sibling going, do you get a little tiny bit of a discount? No discount for multiple kids in the same daycare? Yikes.
And if
No.
if you sick and if your child's sick and like you still have taken like you still have to pay for their week.
Oh, or they'll lose their spot?
Yeah.
Okay, so even if they can't go because they're sick, you have to keep them home, you have to pay. Yeah, so we're talking about like $500 a month,
Basically.
a little bit more than $500 a month for 4 weeks in a month for just one child.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, so some people, of course, there are cultural pressures. A lot of times my female students who are in their early 20s will tell me sometimes that they get questions from relatives, when are you going to give me grandbabies, or when are you going to have a baby? Usually it's the females who get those questions. Sometimes males are like, yeah, I get that question too, but that's not typically the first question. You guys in here, can you tell me what's like the first question you get from relatives when they see you for a while?
When you're getting married.
Is it about marriage? It's not about your career. It's not like what you're majoring in.
No.
Really?
It's the major thing. It's like, oh,
For you,
you're
it's
sure
the
you have
major.
a computer? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you
Okay.
going to this college? That's what I get.
Okay, so you get college questions and career questions. A lot of
Sometimes
men.
it's a mixture of both depending on who.
Women will get that question too, but in my experience, the first question women in their early 20s get is, when are you going to give me babies? Grandbabies. When are you going to give me grandbabies? And then maybe, what's your career? What are you going to do? Right? I had one student tell me last semester that she basically fought off, I guess, the question about babies. Like, don't ask me. I'm not giving you any grandbabies right now. Is basically her answer so often that she doesn't get that question anymore. But now she gets the career question, like you were talking about, Lucas. And she said that some members of her family will say, well, how many men can you meet in that career field? She'll get that question. So it's like, okay, we're going to kind of ask you the baby question backhandedly, right, without really asking you the baby question. But women are getting that question because we still have the idea that women, of course, are the baby makers. We do need somebody out there to have children, because without a total fertility rate of 2.1, we're not going to maintain our natural rate of population, natural born rate of population. But women's role, some people debate, most people debate, that women's roles increase here in social esteem, in social empowerment. Other people, however, argue that because women are competing in what you'd call a man's world for wages that were designed for the, quote, breadwinner of the household, that women's role in society is a struggle to get to that equality phase. Yeah. So I don't know. So stage 4 sounds great for women. Is it really great for women? Right? Was stage 2 any better if my role was baby maker? Right? So here's the question. Stage 4, pretty much even birth to death rates, therefore stable population, large population. Population will maintain that. There will be zero population growth, but a large population if your fertility rate is 2.1 children per woman, which is pretty much what we see in stable populations in stage 4. Questions? Comments? What do you think? Do women have it better now or better back then?
And now,
Better now.
definitely.
I think all of society is probably better now with all those. Even though, we see places where infrastructure isn't developed, or we see places where really there's high crime rates or something like that, and we'll talk about that more in depth when we talk about push and pull factors. But there's a whole lot of social problems that come from urbanization, industrialization, the medical revolution. But in general, people look at this stage 4 of population growth as the empowering woman stage and a benefit, a very good benefit to society. Okay, so stage 5. How many of y'all have read something about stage 5? It's in your chapter 2. Yes, sir.
Wasn't it hypothesized that's when we run out of resources to keep growing and then we start?
It's definitely a hypothesis stage because so you're correct about that, and there might be a number of reasons why it would be the hypothesis stage. But in stage 5, you see low birth and death rates, but the death rate starts to increase over the birth rate, and therefore your natural increase rate of the population is not an increase rate at all, it's a decline. So you start to see a decline of population. In overall numbers of population decline, the death rate increases, or I don't want to say increases, the death rate is above the birth rate. So what happens if the death rate is above the birth rate?
Population declines.
More people are dying than are being put back into society, so over time population declines. And like Lucas said, maybe it's because of resources, maybe it's because of, what kind of resources, Lucas? What kind of resources did you read about or think about?
Well, I just remember a sentence of this man hypothesized scarcity of resources.
Scarcity
It
of
wasn't
resources.
specified.
Oh, you're right, yes. So this is basically between stage 4 and stage 5. You definitely should think about Thomas Malthus, who we started to talk about, who predicted that resources will be scarce and therefore would not support this really, really high and quick population increase that he saw way back at the beginning of like stage 2. Right? So absolutely, you're correct to remember that and to relate that to this discussion. Stage 5 is a hypothetical stage because most people argue that there is no place in the world where stage 5 is actually happening, that you see even in places like Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, where you see a really high birth rate and the death rate is slightly below it. So in other words, you have an increase there, an increase of population there, and a place like Japan, for instance, where you see the death rate is very low, but the birth rate is much lower than it. If you take globally these comparisons, you've got a global population staying roughly the same. Higher in some areas, lower in others, that evens it out. Yes, sir?
Actually, isn't China getting close to a stage 5? That's why they got rid of the second child ban, I believe? Or the
Very
one
good. The one-child policy, or now the two-child policy that you're asking about in China. Yes, so who, besides Lucas, has heard of this before? What do these things mean
I've
here?
heard of the one-child policy, but I didn't hear about the
it
two-child.
raised to 2, wasn't it like?
It was raised to 2 very, very recently. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. I think you're right about that. Yeah, so what is this one-child policy?
It was meant to limit population growth because there's
It was
so
meant
many people in China.
to limit population growth because you have such a huge population. So the natural increase rate in China was so high, and and seemed to be going even higher, that in order to improve economic conditions, there were many different reasons behind this one-child policy in China. The economic situation, resource allocation, like you're talking about, was definitely part of it. And so the government intervened in people's lives and said, if you are going to have a family, we will limit it to one child, and one child only. And in that case, because of cultural, there was another kind of demographic transition that when we do population pyramids on Thursday, I'll show you how this kind of works out. But another kind of gender gap demographic transition that we saw result here, because during the one-child policy in China, most couples would give up a female child in favor of a male child because males had different roles in society and still do. Males have different economic benefits to a family overall than females do. And so quite a few female babies, if they weren't killed, gender selective abortion or female infanticide, many female children were given for adoption, for instance, during this one-child policy, waiting to see, am I going to have a boy the next time? Sometimes it would be 2 or 3 girls were given away or terminated, waiting for that boy. So now you see a demographic transition where there are far more adult males in a society, in that particular society, than there are adult females. And just as a little extra piece of information that you can win Jeopardy with one of these days, what's his name? Ken Jennings. Y'all can be the next Jeopardy champs. If you leave population unchecked, meaning you're not gender selecting abortions, you're not doing infanticide of one gender over the next, you're not unnaturally controlling birth rates, females have a much better chance of survival. Female babies are just, you can say, more robust than male babies at birth and have a much better chance of survival in the long term than males do. So overall, you would end up with a natural gender divide of about 52% females in the world compared to 48% males in the world if you left everything unchecked. You don't see that in cases where gender roles are so divided that sex-selective births result in skewed numbers of males to females in society. Okay? So yeah, the one-child policy in China was put in place to, not because of, to like force them into stage 5, but because they wanted to kind of stabilize the population based on resources. Yes, ma'am?
Not to get off topic, but aren't there countries, I think in like Scandinavia, that are actually promoting families to have children?
Yes,
Yeah, I think
very
it's
good.
Scandinavia.
That's another kind of the debate about whether stage 5 exists or not, because I don't know of any specifically in Scandinavia. I mean, Siri could tell us. Yeah, you can look it up really quick to see. But I remember in my college years, I had an exchange student from Austria, a little tiny country in Europe, okay? And she told me that at that time in Austria, the government, instead of having a one-child policy, most women, most families in Austria had opted, let me say this better, most childbearing age women in Austria were opting not only to put off having families, but in most cases not have families at all. So the total fertility rate was far lower than replacement level, and there were government demographers, people who studied the demographics of a country, who predicted that the native-born Austrian population would be extinct, basically, if I remember correctly, around 2030. So we're coming up on that time. This was back in the 90s when I'm telling you about, when this was happening. And so the government there did exactly the opposite of what China was doing at the time with their one-child policy, and they started offering incentives for women to have babies. if I remember correctly, it was like $20,000 stipend if a woman would have a baby, and she had, they gave her like a year of maternity leave, paid maternity leave, I think. And actually fathers had 6 months of what's called paternity leave that was unheard of in the United States back at the time. Now we have many people who go on paternity leave.
I remember I saw like an ad
Mhm.
like telling all these like benefits that would come if you had a child, like that, the paternity leave and the 1 year.
Yeah, so
It
there's
was
so
like,
the incentives like today,
yeah, it
it
was like an ad like for on TV for those countries.
like please have a baby. Yeah.
It was
Yeah, so that's why stage 5 is debatable, because like I've mentioned Japan, South Korea, of course, is another potentially stage 5 country. That's a really good idea, I think, for y'all to maybe choose as a reaction paper topic this week, because stage 5 is debatable. Some people don't even include it on like the demographic transition model chart, the picture that I posted in last week's folder on Blackboard. Sometimes stage 5 isn't even included on those charts because it's debatable. But when we look at these new developments, like in whatever Scandinavian countries Carla is talking about, or Japan or South Korea, you do see an aging population. You see an issue that's discussed in your textbook where there's a whole lot of elderly people, usually classified as 65 or older, compared to the 18 to 65-year-old set. So if we have a whole lot of elderly people in a society who need care, and not a whole lot of taxpayers or not a whole lot of workers to devote to the care of elders, not a whole bunch of children that they had who would do it as a family obligation, then you see some economic strain, you see some problems in society. Anybody else? Yeah, y'all should do that as a reaction paper this week. Decide for yourself, do you think stage 5 is a real thing, or you think no, we're in stage 4, and you can probably find some really good outside sources to cite for that topic too. Okay, if you have any questions, please speak up. Okay, good. Everything is clear, right? No questions? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
Would 1984 be a stage 5 society?
Ooh. A fictional one, of course,
Yes,
but the novel
but I say that
1984.
'cause they have
Ew, it's
so
been
much-
so long since I've read that book, but I think probably,
They
yeah.
have so much propaganda basically saying like don't have sex.
So, yeah, so
only,
the
like,
question-
have, like a couple of kids.
Let me just repeat that question in case the online, because I'm pretty sure online students couldn't hear your voice. So the question was, the novel 1984, would that describe a stage 5 society? And you're right, it's been so long since I've read that.
More of a dystopian.
Wasn't it like,
A dystopian
it
kind of
was like,
society.
I think there was someone was explaining 1984 online. It was like there was like 3 different countries, and like they were all dictatorships, and they
Yeah,
all were
I
at
remember.
war
So
and
I
all
do
that.
remember Winston was like the name of the lead character. Gosh, I need to reread that book. But I think you have a really good argument. Like there's an outside source too,
Yeah,
right?
'cause the population
To maybe
wasn't growing at
analyze the content of that novel to see what stage of demographic transition. I think you're right. It would probably be exactly the ingredients necessary for to be in stage 5. But again, that doesn't prove that we have countries right now that are actually in that. But we can definitely write about them, right?
Yeah,
And
we talked
in,
about that idea of,
in
like,
Divergent, for instance, those movies, or in 1984, yeah. Okay, so good question. Alrighty, so is your hand up? No, okay. Okay, so we are going to talk about now other things besides birth, besides this natural increase rate of a society. And remember, I'm putting natural increase rate of a society in quotes because we've talked about some unnatural kind of things, right? Like urbanization and medical revolution and stuff like this, where we manipulate nature in order to result in higher or lower birth rates. In stage 4, for instance, where some women do put off motherhood, maybe in some cases too long, you get a brand new industry popping up called fertility, right? A new area of medicine that you can go into, right? And so you've got people trying to put off their put off their birthing years for so long that they have eggs harvested or eggs sold to couples that are not fertile, or extra hormone treatments or something, to get natural conception to take place, or in vitro. All of these different kinds of things become an industry in a society where birth rates or your birthing years are postponed, right? So anyway, there's a whole bunch of different markers about fertility for stage 4. But there are other factors that can make a population increase or decrease. And let's talk a minute about push factors and pull factors, okay? So push versus pull factor. Sorry, I've got this thing right in the middle of this board here. But so push factor or pull factor. So there's 4 categories of push or pull factors that we're going to talk about. I'm going to put 2 over here and 2 over here, but please make sure you're clear in your notes that all 4 of these can be considered push and all 4 of these can be considered pull factors. Okay? So these 2 things are about migration. What does the word migration mean?
Moving somewhere.
You are moving what? Moving across the street? Moving to a new. Does it have to be a great distance is essentially my question.
No.
It really doesn't have to be a great distance. So moving anywhere, does it have to be a large number of people, or can it just be one?
I could migrate across the next room. And that's
Yes,
migration.
yes, we're going to go on a mass migration as soon as the bell rings and we change classes, right? Yes, so anytime there's movement going on, you have migration. So there's 2 different kinds of migration. One is spelled this way, to immigrate, and the other one is spelled this way, to immigrate. Don't you just love it when they're pronounced exactly the same way? Immigrate or immigrate? Okay? Who is already aware of the differences between these 2 things?
Isn't the I, the one that starts with an I, like going into?
Yes, good. And so yes, so the one that goes with starts with the I, you are going from someplace into another one. And the idea is that it's going to be a permanent situation. Okay? So the I here, you're going into.
The other one you're exiting.
Very good. The other one, you are exiting a place for another place. And it can be internal, maybe internal to the United States. For instance, I left Mississippi, moved to Arkansas. My husband and I are talking about retirement. We're going to move back to Mississippi, right? Okay, so not anytime soon. I'm at least going to finish out the semester. Okay. So anyway, immigration is exiting a place. Immigration is going into a place, and we decide there's different kinds of migration, but voluntary migration is the first kind that we're going to talk about, and we're going to discuss push factors and pull factors. Push is exactly what it sounds like. You live in a place, and the place is undesirable, so it's causing you to want to leave. It's helping with your decision to want to exit, okay? Pull factor, if you want to exit one place, how do you decide where you're going to go? You look at issues, characteristics of the places that you are considering, and whatever looks the best is going to literally draw you toward it. That's a push factor, okay? Pull factor, thank you, pull. I'm pointing at the word pull. It's just like the little kid, trying to enter or, push or pull. So it's a pull factor if it's drawing you toward it. Thank you. Okay, so all 4 of these things that I'm going to put on the board here go with push factors. All 4 of them go with pull factors. The first one that we're going to talk about is economic. An economic factor. So, economic factors, like I said, can be push or pull. What kinds of things would you say are classified as economic reasons why someone might leave or someone might enter a different area? What's an economic factor? Jobs. Jobs and opportunities for jobs, right? The potential for jobs. What kind of jobs?
Technology, building.
Maybe better paying jobs. Maybe there's plenty of jobs out here in the countryside, but you don't make very much money with agriculture, and so you want to go into the urban area, for instance, where there's more jobs, better paying jobs, more opportunities for jobs. Yes, sir.
I was gonna list an example. There's a company, Wizards of the Coast. They have
Wizards of the Coast. Okay.
they do stuff like D&D. They make
Okay.
Games like that.
Mm-hmm.
So their headquarters is in Washington. My friend Luke applied there because he wants to work there. If he's accepted, he's going to move to Washington.
There we go.
That would be an economic pull factor.
Absolutely. So your career choice. So another economic pull factor or push factor. Remember, we can say so. We can look at the flip side of education. So, for instance, if certain kinds of jobs require a certain kind of training, certain kind of education, then that's also an economic push or pull factor. Do you have that kind of educational opportunity that's going to enable you to be qualified for consideration of this dream job of yours or this dream career field of yours, right? Some people choose to leave an area in favor of another area where training opportunities are available so that eventually the economic benefit is reached for them, right? Yes, sir.
We're not in stage 5 anymore, are we?
No, now we're talking about push and pull factors. Your job is, if you want to choose it as a reaction paper topic, is to decide for me, argue whether you think stage 5 is a real thing or just that hypothetical thing. If you want to do some research on it for a reaction paper. So no, this is still about population growth or decrease. But now instead of birth rates and death rates and that natural increase rate that are depicted on that demographic transition model, we're talking about other factors that can cause increase or decrease of population. Okay, so voluntary economic migration could be a lack of jobs, would be a push factor. I don't have the kind of job that's going to give me promotion potential, education potential, resources in the area. Maybe the jobs that are available are okay, but where are my children going to go to school? And I want economic opportunities for them, so I'm going to choose a new school district, a new state, or something like that, where there's more educational opportunity. I know a friend of mine who lives in Illinois right now is looking at her children are about to go to high school. She wants to move to a state where there is a scholarship lottery for college. So she has applied. There's several different states with scholarship lotteries, and so she is applying at those different places, and she's applying at several of them based on environmental migration. She's looking for someplace, the 4 2s. Not too hot, not too cold, not too wet, not too dry, right? So she's looking for scholarship lotteries that fit that bill,
Arkansas
right?
is all of those things.
You don't think Arkansas is too hot or too cold or too dry?
All of those things.
I do too. Yes. I think that Arkansas is. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
bipolar. Mother Nature is bipolar.
Yes, in Arkansas, Mother Nature is definitely bipolar. But anyway, I'm jumping ahead to environmental factors that maybe are push or pull, but they can overlap all of this, right? So she has economics as her major push factor, and the pull factor that she's going to look at is the environmental conditions, right? She wants, everybody wants to live on the beach and, have those wonderful days. Yes?
I was going to say, is an impoverished society also a push factor? Like, oh, your roads are broken down. There's lots of abandoned buildings.
Absolutely. Infrastructure can be what we're talking about here as an economic push or a pull factor. So your example is an impoverished area. Probably if your infrastructure is in the pits, then the government doesn't have enough resources to invest in it, which means that the overall tax pool probably does not invest in education very much, which probably means industries that could bring jobs to the area and therefore make you interested in the area aren't going to come. Because what are some of the other pull factors besides just the necessity for jobs in the area, right? So there's more than just families, literally moving across the street is a kind of migration, but there's more than just families moving. We can look at habits that industry industry takes also because, well, for instance, they're building pretty close by. You know where the great big churches are on I-40? Is that I-40? Right here? Yeah, the big Pentecostal churches before you get to Little Rock, like between here and Little Rock. Across the street there, across the interstate, sorry, it's a little bit more than a street. Across the interstate there, Amazon is putting in a big distribution facility. I think that's where they're doing it. Have y'all heard this? There's a great big distribution center there. And right now, there's a lot of talk in city government and in the central Arkansas government. We're going to have a whole lot more jobs, not only low-level jobs, but high-level management jobs, right? And so we're going to have to increase the infrastructure, which is what they're doing in that area. They're bringing in loads of dirt right now to lift, to build it up so they can build big factories. So all of those jobs in construction, all of those jobs in demolition, all of those jobs are precursors to big infrastructure changes that probably will be a pull factor for some people, not only the industry, but some families to be here, right? Probably it's going to change the scope of education. Maybe there will be a different business degree offered at UALR with, who knows, first in, first out marketing or something, the way that Amazon does it. So all of those kinds of things are going to trickle down. What are some other economic connections that you can think of that either would be a push factor, meaning it causes you to leave the place where you originally were, or a pull factor, meaning it's going to draw you to the place when you're trying to leave? Yes, sir. No?
You can talk.
Yes.
Would crime rate go under economic? Because it's been proven that impoverished areas have a higher crime rate. Or would that be an entirely different factor?
I think I'm going to put crime rate
I think crime rate would be
under cultural factors.
I didn't know what all the factors were.
Exactly. We don't have all the factors. So keep that crime rate question and decide. Yeah, keep that crime rate. We'll do cultural. I was going to do political next, but let's do cultural next. Cultural factors.
Wait, there's another one for economic.
Oh, what is it?
Family. Family.
Like a better environment for your family or a better culture for your family?
Or do you
Well,
mean
like,
where you
Let me just say something really quick. As I'm putting these on the board in nice little 1, 2, 3, 4 fashion. So like your question about crime either being linked to poverty or being linked to job creation or whatever, and then your question about wouldn't family be an economic issue? I'm putting these in nice little packages, 1, 2, 3, 4, but all of them overlap, right? Because the education discussion maybe, well, my friend who's looking for those environmental pull factors so that economics can push her out of her region and she can go to a place where there's a scholarship lottery available for her children to benefit from that, right? So yeah, let's get these on the board and talk about them, and then we'll talk about like the overlaps and the connections that you see between, because they certainly are, okay? Okay, so what could some cultural reasons be? First of all, what does culture mean here? What does the word culture mean? I can't remember if we've defined that in our class yet.
Shared values.
Culture is about shared values. It's about norms. It's about language. It can be about beliefs. It can be about traditions and rituals. Culture is a collection of all of these shared components. I'm so glad, Carla, that you started that with the word shared, right? Because we're talking about communities of people with those things in common, okay? Culture is always shared, it's always learned. Okay, so there can be some cultural push factors that make someone want to exit a place. There can be some cultural pull factors that make someone want to come into a place because of the benefits. What am I talking about here?
I have like an example. I have one of my friends. He is like really into the music scene of like different cities.
Yes.
So he'd like to move somewhere like Chicago or LA where the music scene is.
Okay, and
I
see.
think that's part of the culture.
Okay, so there's a big music scene, or there's a big theater scene, or there's a big,
Art.
art, or a big theater or something like this. Yes, and so that might be a cultural reason to move from, especially like from a rural area. Typically, a rural area does not have that kind of that pop cultural kind of diversity, right? So rural to urban, is there a big change in culture, a big change in daily life from rural to urban? Amen, there is, right? There's a big one. And so just think about from countryside to city, in that demographic transition model, the major change that took place in daily style of life, daily living. And that goes along with a cultural transition. And so I think that your example of like a place where it's an artist's mecca, kind of, right? So in an urban area where there's an artist colony or some kind of structure to benefit artists or to get them on their feet. When you said a music scene, I immediately thought of Nashville, right? To be close to here. And I heard somebody say New Orleans maybe, if it's like jazz or something, right? Yeah, so it would depend on the genre, right? But that is a cultural component that could draw somebody in or push somebody out toward one of these places. It absolutely overlaps with economics. Yeah.
I'm doing this just to mention New Orleans. I have a friend who just hates Mardi Gras. He just hates it entirely. He's very traditional.
He lives in New Orleans. He doesn't like the Mardi Gras time.
Well, does he like here? But I was gonna say he would never move to New Orleans.
Oh,
If he
simply
was there,
because
he would
of that. Yes. So you would choose not to go to a particular place. Yeah, I've got some friends who live in New Orleans and they intentionally plan to be gone for like 2 weeks around Mardi Gras because they just can't stand the crowds, you know, so they do a temporary, a transitional kind of migration to in particular be gone from a place when there's a cultural thing going on. Yes.
So I had a girlfriend who lived in Hot Springs, and every time like it was motorcycle season or track season, she spent as much time out of there as she could have because of how much like foot traffic.
How many people change for that particular for seasons? Yeah, those are some environmental factors. Why back to the too hot, too cold, too wet, too dry kind of thing. The 4 twos that we look at for maybe why environmental factors push us away. Those are good examples. What else for cultural? Yes. Religion. Excellent. Religion. Wonderful. Such as. Give me an example.
Christianity, Islam.
Oh yes, so examples of religions in general: Christianity, Islam, Judaism.
Oh, the
yes.
Baptist, the Bible Belt.
The Bible Belt, excellent. As a matter of fact, for part of my PhD work that I'm working on right now, I'm looking at the pull factor of the Bible Belt for Hispanic families, because it seems like really conservative, maybe evangelical type cultures are a draw for certain types of families. So in Arkansas right now, in Tennessee, in Mississippi, all through that Bible Belt core, right, you see really burgeoning Hispanic communities really growing. And most people I've interviewed say it's not necessarily about religion, but the diversity, not a specific religion, but a diversity of the denominations that are available, right? Not just one assumption or the next. So I also have a former colleague of mine, she worked at the College of Education at UALR when I was there, who was Jewish, and her dream was to retire, which she did a few years ago, and move to Israel because she's Jewish. So her specifically was a cultural reason, a cultural pull factor to Israel, where she wanted to be around like-minded people, to use her. Yeah, she did. She moved there about 12 years ago. Yeah, she sure did. And she spent many summers there before that, before she was able to retire. So there's all kinds of cultural reasons why someone might be pushed out of an area. Have you seen the movie Hotel Rwanda? Oh, it's a hard movie to watch. I hesitate a little bit because it's like really, for me, I'm such a crybaby and I just cannot stand seeing people be so cruel to each other. But in Hotel Rwanda, it's a movie that it's based on a true story. It's in the 1990s. There was a war, a civil war. Oh, isn't it terrible? There was a civil war, and it was a cultural one. It was an ethnic war where one powerful ethnic group, literally, I'm simplifying it a lot, but essentially one ethnic group disliked the other ethnic group so much that they attacked and tried to have, you know what a genocide is?
Yeah.
Genocide,
Right,
yeah.
wipe 'em out.
Genocide is wiping out an entire people, gente in Spanish, or it's a Latin derivative. This means people. So one cultural group attacked another cultural group, tried to wipe all of them out. Remember, this means death. And so this can be a cultural push factor. I've got to preserve my culture. I've got to help myself and survive. And so I'm going to get the heck out if I can. Right? So war can be a cultural factor, just like it can be a political factor, which is another one on our list to make. So sometimes, you know, I mention this because we've used kind of happy reasons, right? Like I'm going to move here because there's an artist community and I can really thrive, right? That's a wonderful thing, and it takes money to be able to do that, right? So you already have to have a certain kind of economic condition to be able to opt to do that kind of thing. But not always are the cultural push factors pleasant ones, right? So maybe the rural area, Lucas, thank you, is going to push you out because you dislike the culture, whereas other people they dream of moving to the country, right? So again, it's going to be that preference, but other times it's a serious cultural situation where your religious group is being targeted. You are forced to flee or to go into hiding because, you know, to practice your religion, for instance, and you want to protect yourself.
Also, as you mentioned the crime, my brother was telling me about one of his friends his whole family was forced to move here because of the crime in his country. I think it was somewhere in Latin America. They were trying to get the younger siblings to join like some gang or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if they didn't, you know, they were gonna kill them. So they moved. So I think
Yeah,
that was
and thank you for helping me bring that conversation back around to your question
Yeah.
about crime. Because I don't know, I think I would put crime as like a cultural thing. When you were asking about its link to economics, what was the main thing on your mind here? Just the link with poverty?
Pretty much, because it's just like impoverished regions have a higher crime rate. It's just a
Well,
general.
actually, what the situation seems to be is not that impoverished places have higher crime rates, but there's more policing. There's more like police observation going on in these kinds of places. So if I'm watching you more often than I'm watching them, who am I going to catch?
That's a
you.
good point.
Right?
Good point.
Yeah, so there's not that, so that's a myth that there's a correlation between, poverty causes crime. No. Don't leave here thinking that poverty causes crime. No. You do see some trends where higher crime is found in poverty, but you have to question, is that simply because we are watching you more than you, right? So yeah, I mean, there could still be some really good maybe reasons why you would put crime up here with economic, but I think I would go with cultural, or even the next one that we won't get to begin until Thursday, the next push factor, which is political. That's not right, yeah. So that's a political push or pull factor. You're being, you've heard the term refugee. Yes, okay. I'm a terrible speller, thank you. You've heard the term refugee before. Usually a refugee is somebody who's fleeing from cultural or political strife. Maybe there is a dictator or some kind of person who is bringing the government down in so much control. Like right now you could look up, I was about to say Venezuela. Right now you could look up news stories about the economic conditions that people are linking directly to the political situation in places like Venezuela that are causing push factors. People are trying to cross the border and try to find, and there's also, crime rates going up and war and that kind of thing. Yeah. So we will begin with political push and pull factors on Thursday, and finish up. We'll finish up this population discussion at that time too. Yes, ma'am. What's your question?
The political is under for the pushback.
Oh yes, all four. Okay, so before I stop this, yes. So the push factors and pull factors are both things that we can talk about regarding immigration or immigration, like these two spellings. All four of these things are push and pull factors. I just don't have space to draw them all the way down in a line. So yes, sometimes economic things are push factors, sometimes they're pull. Sometimes cultural things are push, sometimes they're pull, sometimes political are push, sometimes they're pull. And then we will also talk about the environmental ones on Thursday too. Okay? Thank you. See you later.